Hey guys, it's Sam, and welcome to Caps Lock, a podcast designed to help you live bigger, better, louder, and longer. Before we get started, I just want to thank you guys for listening and for giving this a chance and for coming here in pursuit of your best self. This is a space where we are going to grow together, and I hope that it helps you go forward confidently, unapologetically, and with purpose. It's time to live your life in Caps Lock. If that mission feels aligned for you, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and let's dive in. We talk so much on this show and in the wellness space about how important it is to get good sleep, to get enough sleep, to get efficient sleep, to get deep sleep. I feel like everyone talks about it, and there are so many reasons why it's important that it almost gets lost. I sometimes feel like when there's that much information coming at you about something, you almost just start to ignore it. It's almost like there's a clear wall in front of you, and it hits up against this wall and then slides down, and you never really absorb any of it. So we all know that it's important to get good sleep, but I think it's really important that we start talking about what could happen if we don't get enough sleep and if we don't get enough good sleep or deep sleep. So today we are going to talk about something that I was so interested in. I did the biggest rabbit hole deep dive on it ever, and it totally scratched the science nerd itch in my brain. And I think you guys are really going to like it. So let's dive in. As you may know, there is nothing I love more than discovering a part of my body or brain that I didn't know existed. And I'm not talking about an extra toe or something. This week, I was doom scrolling a little bit on Instagram, even though I will be the first to tell you how terrible that is for your physical and mental health. Oh, and yeah, I did say physical health, by the way. I don't think people talk about that enough. It goes way beyond your fucked up neck and your weirdly dented pinky finger. But if you go back a couple weeks and listen to my How to Stop Doom Scrolling episode, you can learn a little bit about how it impacts you and strategies for reducing screen time. Anyway, even though I will be the first to tell you how bad doom scrolling is, I'm only human, and sometimes even I get sucked in despite being highly aware of this habit and its consequences. And let this be a sign to forgive yourself when you do something like that instead of feeling guilty and punishing yourself, and to remember that balance is okay, because I was rewarded for this particular doom scroll by stumbling upon this beautiful genius gem of a human being who I didn't really know about before, and her name is Emily McDonald. She's a neuroscientist and brain coach with millions of followers on social media. And she makes these short, digestible videos about fun and interesting neuroscience facts. Absolutely loved her. And Emily, if you're listening to this, please come on the pod. And Emily, if you're not listening to this, but other people are, send it to Emily. I'm going to reach out. Anyway, the video I saw is her talking about how every night when we go to bed, our brains basically do this big waste dump, and all the junk in your brain drains out into your neck. And when it builds up there, it contributes to cognitive dysfunction that can be as severe as Alzheimer's and dementia. But there is a way to remove all the buildup. And when you remove the buildup, it can actually make positive changes to your cognitive function. According to Emily, people even get their memories back. This drainage system is called the Glymphatic system. And today we are going to do a deep dive on it because I had never heard of that before. And what a blessing it is to be empowered with information that can change our lives for the better. So today I'm going to get into what it is, what it does, how it hurts, how it helps, and how we can optimize it to live our healthiest lives. Stay with me. Now, if you are sitting here thinking I'm just mispronouncing the word lymphatic, the first stop on our tour today is where I will be debunking that and explaining to you the difference between the lymphatic system and the glymphatic system. That's with a G. First things first, let's rewind a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about your circulatory system. And I swear this is all going to come full circle. I just want to give you a really clear picture of exactly what we're talking about. So your circulatory system is made up of all your veins, your arteries, capillaries, which help move blood throughout your body. Capillaries are super delicate, like teeny tiny blood vessels, and their job is to connect your arteries to your veins so nutrient-rich blood can like move about your body and get into your tissue and like whatever else. They also have capillaries, really thin walls with like kind of tiny little holes in them, which allow fluids and gases to pass through relatively easily. As such, they are great spots for your body to remove carbon dioxide as well as waste from your cells. As your capillaries move blood around your body, naturally, some of the plasma in your blood can seep out through those capillary walls. And while this sounds like a bad thing, it's actually not. Once the plasma exits your capillary through those thin walls, it's actually called something different, and it's called lymph. And lymph is a sort of watery fluid that actually accomplishes a number of things in your body. Number one, it delivers oxygen, protein, and nutrients to your tissues. Number two, it cleans up like debris, including damaged or cancerous cells, bacteria, viruses. And number three, it picks up any kind of like extraneous fluid from your cells and tissues that the capillaries are not able to absorb and continue to carry on through your blood. After the lymph, which remember, lymph is the liquid. Once it goes through the capillary, it turns from plasma to lymph. After the lymph does all of those things, like delivering the oxygen, picking up the debris, like that kind of thing, once it does all of that, it's full of junk. I kind of think of it like street cleaners. Like they're just picking up all this garbage. They're delivering good stuff and then they're picking up the garbage. So it's full of extra liquid, damaged cells, bacteria, and it moves into the lymphatic capillaries, whose job it is to return lymph back into your body. And if you're like, what the fuck? It just picked up all this junk. Like, I don't want all that being delivered back into my body. Don't worry, I got you. Stay with me. As the dirty lymph flows through your lymphatic capillaries, it passes through lymph nodes. Now, I know you've heard of that before, but this is what they do. Their job is to look through the lymph and send white blood cells to destroy any of the junk inside it. Then, once the lymph has been filtered by the lymph nodes, it's returned back into your system where it repeats the whole cycle again of seeping out of your capillaries, delivering nutrients, picking everything up and cleaning everything up, getting filtered, and so on. That is the cycle. So overall, your lymphatic system is part of your immune system because it's tasked with the job of cycling lymph throughout your body to protect you from infections and abnormal cells. It maintains normal levels of fluid in your body. You can absorb fats and fat-soluble vitamins that it can deliver back into your bloodstream. Now, sidebar for a sec, this is why lymphatic drainage massages are so good for you. I think everyone thinks they just like reduce bloating and make you pee, which they do. But they can also strengthen your immune system because basically the massage therapist will massage the places on your body that house the lymph nodes to sort of like wake them up. And then they massage you in a pattern or like a direction that coaxes the junked up lymph fluid toward the nodes so the nodes can filter it and return it into your bloodstream to cycle back through. So I highly recommend a lymphatic drainage massage if you're sort of feeling like you're about to get sick or if you've been traveling a lot. It's so great. And it also does reduce bloating. So if you're like going on vacation, this is perfect. So here's where we start to talk about the glymphatic system. The glymphatic system is basically the same thing as your lymphatic system, but it's sort of a smaller, more focused version of it that exists only within your central nervous system, which is comprised of your brain and your spinal cord. And there's a protective membrane that actually separates your brain from the rest of your body. So basically, for the last few decades, scientists have been trying to figure out how we've been able to live for so long with healthy brains that don't suffer more and suffer sooner from this waste buildup. And only recently did they discover that this glymphatic system is what gets toxins from within the protective membrane surrounding your brain out into the body where it can be excreted. So let's back up a bit and we'll better understand the glymphatic system. I think this is so interesting. Like, this is a good science episode. Like, this stuff is like easy to understand and also fascinating and also like relatively new research. So I'm geeking. When you're awake, your brain consumes a ton of energy to carry out its basic functions. And I think about it like eating a meal. You eat food, your body retains the necessary nutrients, and you excrete waste. Your brain does the same thing all the time, and its primary source of energy is glucose. So your brain consumes glucose, just like you eating a meal, retains the energy from the glucose, and then excretes waste. The waste is known as metabolic waste because it's the result of metabolizing the glucose. And metabolizing, in like the simplest terms, just refers back to the process of converting food into energy. So your brain spends all day working and working and working and producing waste as a result. And inside that waste are toxic byproducts of the metabolic process. And some of those toxic byproducts are carbon dioxide, lactate, which is not exactly the same as lactic acid, but for the purposes of this episode is basically the same thing. Amyloid beta or beta amyloid, you can, use them interchangeably, and tau. And if you've listened to other episodes that we've done in the past, you'll know that amyloid beta and tau are like the two biggest markers of Alzheimer's and contributors to Alzheimer's. So that's really interesting. So all that stuff is in the waste that your brain produces as part of the metabolic process. So let's break down quickly what each of these toxic byproducts actually does to you when it builds up in your system. Buildup of carbon dioxide causes hypercapnia, and as levels of carbon dioxide increase, symptoms get worse. So hypercapnia can cause headaches, fatigue, sluggishness, and then in a little bit of like a more intense case, disorientation, a confused and altered mental state. And then when you get a little bit more intense from that, it can cause paranoia, depression, seizures. Buildup of carbon dioxide in your brain is BAD bad. Now, lactate, your brain requires a certain amount of lactate in order to function properly. Too much or too little of it can cause or heavily participate in the development of neurological dysfunction and neuropsychiatric diseases such as major depressive disorder, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, MS, and something called myasthenia gravis. I don't know what that is. I should have looked that up. Now, let's talk about beta amyloid and tau, because I think we've heard a bunch of times that they contribute to Alzheimer's, but here's exactly how they do that. Basically, beta amyloid can break down, and then when it's broken down, all the little particles it turns into can stick together. And when they stick together, they form this sort of plaque that can coat the outside of your brain. When the plaque attaches itself to your brain, it can damage the walls of blood vessels because blood vessels are very thin and delicate. And when those blood vessels are damaged, that can lead to brain bleeds, cognitive impairment, and also the death of cells. This plaque can also attach itself to nerve receptors. And basically, when that happens, it erodes the connections between nerve cells. And those connections are responsible for storing memories, processing thoughts, planning physical movement. So a buildup of beta amyloid can cause all of those things to happen, and that's part of why it's a major cause of Alzheimer's in humans. Now, tau is the other kind of major contributor to Alzheimer's that we hear about so much. Basically, healthy neurons are supported by structures of microtubules, and tau's job is kind of to stabilize those microtubules. But the problem occurs when tau actually detaches from the microtubules, and instead of being a supportive kind of structural element, when it detaches, it starts sticking to itself, kind of like what beta amyloid was doing. Tau starts sticking to tau, which creates kind of a tangled web inside of your neurons, and that blocks communication between them. So abnormal tau most often accumulates, interestingly, in the parts of your brain that are responsible for memory. And as beta amyloid spreads throughout the brain, so does tau. And so that's kind of the interplay between them that can cause Alzheimer's. So as you can probably imagine, if your body just allowed this stuff to build up in your brain forever without flushing it out, you would suffer severe cognitive and neuropsychiatric conditions. But that's where the glymphatic system swoops in to save the day. According to research and testing on the subject, which I've linked in the show notes as usual, your brain cells literally shrink when you fall asleep, which increases interstitial space. And in other words, interstitial space just means the space in between your brain cells. Thanks to all that extra space, cerebrospinal fluid and interstitial fluid have more room to flow between the cells and around the brain, which kind of washes the brain of toxins and those like metabolic waste byproducts. But you might be wondering, where does it go? Right? Like we're in the brain, there's all this liquid washing our brains. Now the liquid's full of toxic waste. Where does it go? And like I said earlier, there was a long time when scientists couldn't really answer that question. Like they didn't really know. They knew there was a protective membrane around the brain that would theoretically block the fluid from exiting the brain through the regular lymphatic system. So they were like, how is it that our brain produces all this metabolic waste, but we're like largely okay for a really long time? Once the toxins are pushed out into that cerebrospinal fluid and it's rushing around up there, there's basically a vein that starts in the brain and it goes through the protective membrane. The vein is wrapped in like a sort of sleeve, and the sleeve is never fully sealed. So that's what happens. The cerebrospinal fluid containing all those toxins sort of goes through that vein and like escapes through that sleeve. And from there, the fluid is swept up into the regular lymphatic system so it can be filtered through the lymph nodes and you can excrete the toxins. Now, this all sounds amazing and like your body's just like handling its business and you don't have to do anything. But there are circumstances in which this drainage is blocked or interrupted or otherwise disturbed. And that can cause all the problems we discussed a minute ago: cognitive dysfunction, memory loss, harmful plaque buildup, confusion, disorientation, sluggishness, fatigue, seizures, Alzheimer's, dementia, depression. The list goes on forever. And those circumstances are a little bit varied, but they're very common. So I just wanted to bring up some of the biggest, most popular ones so we can be aware of them. And the biggest and most popular ones are sleep and aging. So if you are not getting enough sleep, if the sleep you're getting is not efficient, if it's not restful, if you're not getting REM sleep, and as you get older. So like one of those things we can control, right? We can control if we're getting enough sleep and how good the quality of our sleep is. We cannot control aging. So in my opinion, and like the way I kind of approach my life is there's so much information all the time. And there are so many kind of unavoidable evils in this world that are like gonna end our lives sooner than we want to, right? Like, I don't know, maybe humans could live forever if we weren't constantly running into carcinogens and endocrine disruptors and like all of these other things, right? So there are some things in our lives we can't avoid, like aging. But when I come across something that I have control over that can make a huge difference in the long-term health of my brain, and it's such a low-lift one, for example, getting sleep and doing what I can within my power to make sure that sleep is restful, I'm like, why wouldn't you want to know about this and practice it, right? Anyway, lack of sleep, poor quality sleep, and aging are some of the most popular things that can create a blockage of that drainage of those like waste and byproducts. And when you're experiencing blockage, a lot of times the toxic byproducts of the metabolic process build up and sit in your neck area because brain and neck lymph, which again, that's the liquid that comes from your brain and neck, or more accurately, I guess in this case, it's really like cerebrospinal fluid. It drains into the jugular lymphatic trunk, and that is located inside your neck. This information is supported by a clinical study, again, linked in the show notes, where researchers tested their theory that decompressing that lymphatic trunk could facilitate the flow of this cerebrospinal fluid and accelerate the clearance of all these toxins. So these researchers collaborated with surgeons who specialize in this type of what they call super microsurgery, like it's so literally so tiny. And so in collaboration with these surgeons, they performed this like decompression drainage procedure on 6 different patients, all of which were ruled a success. There were no adverse reactions beyond initial kind of like disorientation as a result of the anesthesia. And so that cleared completely after 72 hours. But every patient experienced improved attention, reaction speed, language, and their mood. Now, one of those 6 patients has completed and cleared all her follow-up testing, and her results suggest that this microsurgery, like this tiny little drainage procedure, could help prevent and treat Alzheimer's in the general population. She's a 70-year-old woman with Alzheimer's, diagnosed with Alzheimer's, who at the time of the procedure had been experiencing gradual memory loss, anxiety, and depression for 5 years. In the 5th year, she suffered femur and vertebrae fractures, followed by an accelerated decline in memory. So this, like, out of her 5 years that she was experiencing a decline in memory and memory loss, the 5th year started going, like, more dramatically and faster. So she does the procedure, and 5 weeks after undergoing the procedure, her cognitive function improved dramatically. Now, I'm just going to read her results directly from the study and put in a little bit of explainers for things that are kind of confusing that, like, Gen Pop wouldn't understand. Like, I didn't understand it when I read it at first. Her mini mental status examination score increased from 5 to 7, which is a pretty impressive jump. The score on the clinical dementia rating sum of boxes test, which, like, I don't need to deep dive on that test, but basically a lower score on this test is better and indicates less dementia. Her score improved from a 10 to an 8. Her depressive mood had completely resolved. She had taken a geriatric depression scale test, and when she originally took the test, she scored a 9. And then after the procedure, she took the test and she scored a 0. That's crazy. Her depressive mood completely resolved as a result of clearing these toxins. And if you think that's just one of those like, at first I was like, okay, maybe she was just like, oh, I'm so happy that, like, my cognitive and, like, memory are improving, so, like, I'm not depressed anymore, and that she just answered questions in a different way because she, like, temporarily had a mood change. That's what I thought had happened in the beginning. I was like, okay, she was just, like, instantly happy, so she scored a 0 on the test. No. They actually did a PET scan that provided objective evidence of improvement in her depressive mood. And you can go look at the figures. They put the images from her PET scan in the study. And if you want to go look at those images, you can. But basically, it was like an objective resolution of her depressive mood. I just thought that was so interesting. Okay, now I'm going to try to pronounce a really long word. The F-fluorodeoxyglucose PET scan. Wait, I kind of ate that down. That PET scan showed an overall improvement in brain glucose metabolism, which was most evident in her right frontal lobe, which is so interesting because if you actually read the study, her beta amyloid plaque and her tau signals, as well as cognitive performance, were all worse on the right side before she underwent this procedure. And her PET scan showed overall improvement, especially on the right side. Oh, what a gift. I'm, like, so happy for this lady. I don't know. What else? The T-sum within Alzheimer's regions in her brain. T-sum is a testing and scoring system for dementia that helps doctors assess Alzheimer's severity. And again, on this one, a lower score is better. Her score dropped from 92 to 81. So an 11-point drop in that is great. What else? The tau PET scan showed an overall reduction of tau proteins in the brain. And then the index of the diffusion tensor image analysis along the perivascular space increased from 1.19 to 2.26, indicating improved brain health. That was a lot of words. I didn't even really fully understand them, but I did look them up to understand the gist of what this whole thing means, which is basically a higher score on the DTI index shows that more fluid is flowing and therefore clearing out this waste and all these toxins. So when her score goes from a 1.19 to a 2.26, that indicates that she almost doubled the flow of this cerebrospinal fluid that's, like, clearing out the waste and toxins from her brain. I'm so happy for this lady. Anyway, most of us are not currently experiencing Alzheimer's, so this microsurgery is probably not a great fit for us right this moment in our lives. And if that's the case, you might be wondering what we can be doing in our daily lives to encourage the flow and drainage of these toxins through our glymphatic system. And I'm so glad you asked because, of course, I have a list for you. Number 1, get more sleep and better quality sleep. We have already learned that our brain swells during the day while it's active and awake, which restricts the flow of cerebrospinal fluid and therefore limits your ability to detox all this waste. Deep levels of sleep, like NREM and REM levels of sleep, are best for allowing your brain to shrink down, open up all that interstitial space, and allow the interstitial and cerebrospinal fluid to pick up and transport all those toxins throughout your glymphatic system, which then transfers them to your lymphatic system, which allows you to clear them out. Number 2, newer research, and more needs to be done to explain exactly how much this helps, but I just thought it was interesting because I am a side sleeper. Newer research suggests that sleeping on your side can actually help clear the waste better than sleeping on your back. And this is based on information that back sleepers have maybe like more and earlier onset dementia or Alzheimer's. So again, needs way more research, but I feel less guilty for sleeping on my side now. Number 3, move your body. This is a tip that I first picked up from the original video that Emily McDonald made. Her favorite way to do this is jumping on a trampoline, actually, which I think sounds so fun. It's called rebounding, very chic and sounds very much like a real thing. Anyway, jumping on a trampoline, jumping rope, or taking a cardio class that requires a little bit of like up down, it can help a lot by sort of kind of opening and closing or like loosening and contracting the vertebrae in your neck area, which encourages the flow and the movement of these liquids. And then we also know that exercise in general just reduces brain inflammation and slows the buildup of beta amyloid. So definitely move your body, but something where you're jumping or like some kind of cardio is really good for this specific concern. Number 4, eat omega-3 fatty acids. This is found mostly in fish oil. So like eat your salmon girlies. The omega-3 fatty acids can help reduce amyloid plaque buildup. So there's less to flush out in the first place. Amazing. Number 5, I'm so sorry to continue being a party pooper about this, guys, but reduce or stop your alcohol consumption. Besides alcohol having 0 proven positive effects on your mental and physical health, while simultaneously being a proven group 1 carcinogen, too much alcohol can also slow brain waste clearance and raise your risk of Alzheimer's. I fear there is no good reason to be drinking alcohol anymore, you guys. I mean, I'm never going to sit there and be like, don't order that glass of wine, right? But I am telling you, because I care about you, that it's only bad for us. It's not at all good for us. And you can do things that are not good for you sometimes. Sure, I'm not a cop. I'm not your mom. Do what you want to do, but please reduce it a little bit. Let's take that down a little bit because I want you to live forever so badly. I would love that. Number 6, intermittent fasting. I didn't expect this one, honestly. The glymphatic system uses a protein called AQP4 to facilitate the flow of cerebrospinal fluid in the waste clearance process, which relies on a specific balance of M1 and M23 variants of AQP4. So when you fast, it actually changes the levels of AQP4 in a way that helps the drainage process work more efficiently. Obviously, consult a doctor to see if intermittent fasting is right for you and learn the best way to achieve it within your specific medical circumstances. But I just thought that was really interesting. And number 7, this is the last one, do stress management. Long-term stress speeds up amyloid buildup and is bad for your brain. So now I'm going to rattle off a list of 26 stress management techniques that I love with no elaboration at all, in case you want to pick one and decide if it's right for you. Journaling, outdoor walks, exercise, reducing screen time, placing time limits on your social media, breath work, reading books, I love fiction in particular, drawing or painting, meditation, watching your favorite comfort show with no high-stakes plotline. My current obsession for that type of viewing is The Mindy Project. Cooking, limiting your caffeine intake, taking a mental health day from work if appropriate, spending time with animals, somatic or talk therapy, getting a massage or a facial, listening to relaxing music or a sound bath, setting up a structured bedtime and wake up time, and having simple but ritualistic morning routines, eating less refined and processed sugars. Yes, these literally cause you stress. Do some research. Dumping your situationship, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb for an entire weekend. Learning a new skill or sport, spending quality time with your safe people, engaging in red light therapy, doing a cold plunge, and having sex. 26 of my favorite stress reduction techniques. You're welcome. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for giving Caps Lock a chance. If you liked this episode, please stick around for more because we have some really interesting topics on the docket, including the importance of recovering after a workout, protein powders and supplements, seed oils 101, manifestation, cortisol, and so much more. Some will be solo episodes and some will feature scientists, founders, experts, doctors, and other very cool, smart people. If there's a topic you want to hear about on Caps Lock, send me a message. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads at Life in Caps Lock. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Leave me a rating or review. These are super important to podcasters. And tune in next Sunday at 8 a.m. for another episode of Caps Lock. Okay? Love you. Talk soon.